When I look at this photo, or two photos, it makes me wonder, where did the years go from 1982 to where I am today? But between that time frame, I've always maintained to look at my life through a creative lens. We can all think of the moments we're driving along the road and something captures our interest, something captures our curiosity. We pull off the road carefully, grab our cell phone and capture a moment. The power of creativity. So what is it that we see that draws our imagination? And what is it that we see that draws our curiosity? When I was young, I would sit next to the piano bench of my mom. She would play the piano, I would listen, I would hear the notes. I would go ahead and hear the rhythm, I'd hear the patterns, I'd hear the harmony. And I could feel that music. Then I got an Instamatic camera and I was taking pictures and looking at things from a different perspective. This on top of Mount Douglas with my brother Craig in the early 70s. I then won my first painting set. It was an oil paint set that I won from a painting I did in junior high of running horses. What I was learning is the language of art. I was learning the rhythm, the pattern, the line, the texture, harmony, all building elements in creativity. I was learning what was important with what's called visual literacy. I was able to see it in nature and capture those moments. But I grew up in Livingston, Montana, a great place, as we all know, for fishing. And I got that rhythm of that fishing down really well, and I could go ahead and pull that in interdisciplinary with the art that I was creating, and then climbing the walls in Paradise Valley in the 70s, before it was very popular. But what happened is, a wilderness defined by two rivers became the Absaroka Mountains in the middle, and it was the Yellowstone River to the west, the Boulder River to the east, and the middle became my playground. Art became my identity. I graduated many years ago, from the art school at MSU. But I wasn't ready to go into teaching. I was ready to embark on a new adventure. An adventure that would take me up Bridge Creek, up in the Absaroka Mountains. And there, I wanted to go ahead and see what it would be to experience solitude, what it would be to be alone. I was curious. But there was one thing. There was an 81-year-old prospector named Charlie that lived up Bridge Creek. He had lived up there since 1940. Many people went up to visit him because he was quite a legend in his own right. And I had the privilege of staying up there for quite some time. I had met him while working at a youth camp down the Boulder Road. So my brother, on January 1st, 1982, dropped me off as far as they could get up the Boulder Road, and I still had 16 miles to ski to get up to the trailhead of Bridge Creek. I got up to the trailhead, and I saw where I had to go up the steep ridge up above. So I took out my ropes that I had that I would wrap around the bottom of my ski to go ahead and give me traction. I didn't have skins, as we call it today. Soon I made it up to Charlie's, and he said, "I was wondering when you were going to get up here." "It was a hard trip," I said, "Charlie. It was a long trip." He said, "Well, you'll eat good. So I've got Spam for dinner, I've got canned peas, applesauce, and you can make the biscuits." So I did, and that was our feast. But I remember sitting around there that evening. I was playing the harmonica, which I often did. He liked hearing it. He was hard of hearing, but he could hear something. And he was looking at a gold pan that was up on the wall. And through the corner of my eye, I could see that. And I asked him, I said, "Charlie, have you ever been to any good gold mines in your day?" He didn't say much. Then he looked over at me. He said, "Yep. The problem is they're never there when I wake up." And it made me think of the importance of dreaming, of having an imagination, and visualization, some of the key interesting components to creativity. It makes me think of Paul Gauguin, the artist, that said, "I shut my eyes in order to see." Later that night, I ended up spending time looking at his old guest books. Like I said, many people came up to see Charlie. And I noticed on 12/19/1977, my brother, Craig Waldum, and I were up there. We skied up there, and this was many years ago. But it wasn't until the summer of 1978, Craig was on a canoeing expedition, a 69-day expedition, and he ended up drowning, and they never found him. So it went through tough times for me, and I was thinking I have to drop out of school here at MSU, the art department. I was having trouble with my grades. My parents wanted me to take a reading comprehension class because my comprehension wasn't good at that time. But it was people at Montana State that believed in me, and they helped me get back on my feet, which took about 18 months. The next day, I skied further up the canyon to where I was going to stay in this old cabin. It was built in the late 1800s. And it was where I would spend much of the time, and it was 20 to 40 below zero. It was very, very cold. But I was able to go ahead and trust myself in the actions that I was seeing. And it started to get me curious about the life around and the time of being alone. And I took this one picture, it was self-portrait. I set the camera on a tripod and got into the picture because I remember this night, it was 40 below, and I knew if I stopped, I didn't want to keep moving. So I recorded that. Today we call them selfies. Back then, it was a self-portrait. You set the camera up, we had film is what we were using, we'd go into the camera would go off, maybe you were in it, maybe you weren't. You didn't know until you got the film developed. For this case, it was many weeks later. That I did get on there. But I would spend countless hours in a hammock that hung over by the wood stove, and I would read books by Edward Abbey, Aldo Leopold, Thoreau, and others. And it really captured my curiosity as far as what is it that we live for? And what is creativity? And I spent countless hours writing in journals of my experience. And this work now, I'm bringing back to life for myself in a writing project I'm working on. I also reflected back on my days at MSU in the art department. This is a drawing I did where I spent 50 hours of work on this falcon. I was very proud of it. I turned it into the instructor, and he complimented me on the technical part, but he said, we could go ahead and expand your creativity. We could go ahead and bring your imagination a little more up where it could be. So I thought about that and what I could do to go ahead and get out of my comfort zone. So later on, I had to do an assignment. I took a whole pile of pencils and I scribbled for 15 minutes on a paper. And I said, I'm finished. It was raw. It was quick. But it had some interest to it. So I turned it in the next day to the instructor, and he said, Paul, I want to see you out in the hallway. I said, okay. And he said, sit down on this bench right here. I sat down, looked up at him, and he said, if you can produce work like this, you're ready for New York City. So I said, I can. So they gave me a full independent study of doing the same technique. When it came time for the student art show, guess which won first place in the undergrad work for drawing? This did. And the instructor talked about the importance of music. He talked about the flutes being in the background lines, and the trumpets being the louder lines, and the movement, and the rhythm of the symphony. And I started to think at the time I was sitting on the piano bench next to my mom. I happened to be in New York City 7 years later. I went into one of the museums, and my mouth must have dropped, because there on the wall was a huge scribble drawing. I was ready for New York City, but my mind wasn't when I was in school. So I also then did a lot of time in the winter looking at Bridge Creek and understanding what the motion of the water was, the patterns, the rhythm, incorporating that in my work today. But probably one of the biggest things after losing my brother was the power of art as healing. And I spent hours with friends, some that are in here tonight, doing trips, taking pictures, living moments in nature. And it was to see a wilderness, we must first open our eyes and see its elements. a grain of sand, a drop of water, a blade of grass, a mountaintop. And this became what I spent my time working on. But I was very pleased. People at MSU helped me from KGLT to the business department. How can I market this program? And in the end, I traveled through the Midwest, 3 different tours to colleges and universities sharing my story. But it wasn't my first choice to go up the boulder that winter, for I was asked to go up to up in Alaska to Denali. Sorry, I couldn't think of that. To Mount Denali. And I remember getting my gear ready. I was looking to see what I'd have to purchase. And my dad came downstairs with tears in his eyes. And he said, "Paul, I lost one son. I can't lose another." These were transformative words for me in my life, how I moved through life, and it also in understanding the importance of looking for other people besides myself. And in this photo, I learned the importance of a good snowshoe binding, a good ski binding, because my life depended on those things, for the avalanche danger was quite high on War Eagle Mountain. This is another mountain. This is what a friend was with me on this one, looking at Monument Peak in the background, 25 below, incredibly beautiful. One day I got lonely up at the upper cabin. I decided to go ahead and ski down to see Charlie. So I put my skis on, went down, and I came across a big 6-point bull elk. And I looked at him, he looked at me, puzzled that we were both up there, and I just kept going. I went down the trail further, and it got dark, and I turned my headlamp off, and I looked up at the stars, and I could see the brilliant stars up above. I closed my eyes, and it reminded me of that quote, "I shut my eyes in order to see and imagine." I could feel my heartbeat. I could almost hear it, and I could hear the snowflakes falling on my Gore-Tex coat. I skied further down. I could smell the wood smoke coming from Charlie's cabin, and I knew I was back down there. I knocked on the door, and I'd always hear, "Come on in, door's open." So I went in, had hot coffee, the steam settled on my glasses, and I talked to Charlie about some of the people that had been there before him, explorers, earlier people that were prospectors, and I learned so much and the connections of generations around us. But my work became, I would say, more interesting from the experiences of life that I had. And I remember on this particular night, I was talking about what it's like to be lonely. I said, "Charlie, I've been lonely, kind of being by myself up there. I haven't experienced it." And then we talked about giving, and I vividly remember him saying, "The most important thing in life is to give. That's what living is all about." So from there, I look at where I've come. 40 years later, that's where I used to have the hammock by the wood stove where I was doing the writing. But the memories are still there. The emotional impact is still there, and the emotional impact in my art has stemmed from a lot of the experiences that I've had. So through my career, I've been able to go ahead and I started the Craigie Waldum Scholarship Fund to give money to students that were looking at going into the humanities or the arts. Here in the Norm Asbjornson building, I was asked to do a painting of the Missouri River, which I donated to the university. And last, the work that I do today stems a lot from the experience I got from instructors in the art department here at the university, such as in these silkscreen prints of Paradise Valley. One of the most exciting things for me in teaching here at the university is a class that I developed called Unleashing Scientific Innovation Through the Creation of Art. It's a multidisciplinary class, and it's designed for students to go ahead and create art in all their different disciplines. I get a lot of pre-med students, engineering students, and it's hard for some of them to go ahead and be creative. But the idea is to increase the creative and critical thinking skills. So these are a list of just some of the different areas of interest and the majors that I have gone through. And these are some of the images that have been created over the last couple years. From Yellowstone Park, a wax painting, to Africa, to found objects along the riverways here in the Gallatin Valley, to printmaking of the brain and brave wavelengths in watercolor, to snow science in the abstract form. This particular young individual was a mechanical engineering student. He would go around and hear music and paint it onto plastic. A scientific illustrator, paleontology, environmental microbiology, where the student would go up to Yellowstone Park and she would go ahead and take pictures of the geyser basins. A nursing student doing a healthy young and one that is not healthy. And last, a philosophy student that he said, "This is my hardest class I've ever taken." I was kind of like, what? But he had not had a chance to explore creativity. It is estimated that 1.94 trillion photographs will be produced this year, mostly from digital smartphones. By 2030, it'll be estimated that 3 trillion images will be created by humanity in 1 year. I have a student in here that took a picture in the class that I teach in what I call digital sketchbooks, where they have to go ahead and use their cell phone as a digital sketchbook. The prompt was transformation. She told me it was 11:30 at night. She got really frustrated because her car broke down right in the middle of the road. She called a friend to come and help her, and he was working under the hood, and she walked away because she saw something through the corner of her eye. She took a picture, a beautiful picture of the Northern Lights, then went back to go work on the car. But it was that creative moment. So I challenge all of us to embrace the creative moments in our daily lives, to go ahead and embrace the ability to have a creative and curious mindset. For the power of art is rich in all of us, and I encourage you to incorporate that into your daily life. Thank you.